All right, you guys ready to kick things off? Yes, let's do it. Let's call this meeting to order of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board this Tuesday, May 8th, 2018. It's just after 3 o'clock. Thanks everybody for being here. So just looking at who all's here. We've got Corey Simonson, Danny Tenenbaum, Jeff Schmerker. We do have Britt Arneson is not here yet. Ryan Harris, myself, Bob Wachtel, Gene Schmitz, Robin Welling, and no Peter Dracos yet. And then we've got Ben Weiss. And go from there, and a member of the public. Awesome, we'll get to you in a minute. What's your name? Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Thomas. All right, let's start off with the approval of the previous minutes. You guys got to take a quick look. Anything that stands out that we need to tweak? Bob's got one. Go ahead. Oh, no. Thumbs up. Sorry. My periphery wasn't good enough there. I want to thank Bob for chairing that meeting. I was out of town. But no, we're all good. All right, seeing no comments, we'll move that along as it stands. And the current agenda, any additions, movements? Ben, did anybody from the PD get back to you?
No. Okay. Travis Welsh had forwarded my multiple requests onto one of the captains, and had a suggestion for a staff member, but I haven't heard back from him, and so we'll just try for June.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for trying. For those of you guys, Danny had emailed with a good suggestion to have one of the topics be talking about just bike theft in Missoula in general, and wanted to get a representative from the PD, police department out here, just addressing that, kind of what the rates are and what we might, if there's anything we can do to help get the word out about preventing it. So we'll table that for maybe June, and maybe even the COW will kind of chat about what we're looking for as a board. Go ahead, Gene.
I just want to mention on 6.1 on the comments that came in regarding the structuring of Higgins for whether it's shared use or bike lane next to a traffic lane, there was it was pretty evenly split. A lot of comments that came for not wanting the bikes to share was people were a little bit afraid that the bikes would speed and weave around and not give them notice and such, and that they've had some of the same problems on the bike path. So this is some of it coming from the pedestrians, and even some cyclists that felt they didn't want to be held up by pedestrians wandering around. The reason I mentioned that is I had made mention in a previous meeting about the idea of doing sort of basically a slightly raised, almost like a shallow dome type of delineating line between the bike area and the pedestrian area to make it less likely that pedestrians would go into the bike area. Can't guarantee it, of course. The other thing I think that we may want to do, Ben, is maybe have it during the first few weeks, and this is a long ways away, of really kind of trying to crack down or highly educate people to not go the wrong way on that bike lane, especially.
Thanks, Gene. All right, anything else about the agenda? Good to go. Awesome. Public comment. Thomas, did you have anything for us that's not on the agenda? All right, awesome. And comments from city staff, etc. We don't have Sergeant Greg Amundson here. So Ben, take it away.
Sure. So the only item that I specifically called out by name on the agenda is the budget, and I'm actually going to wait to get there a little bit, but that's one that I just wanted to be sure to talk with you guys clearly about where we're at in the process and what I asked for this year, and what next meeting we might want letters of support from the board for. So, but before we get to that, I want to provide an update, and Gene mentioning Higgins is a great one since we had the presentation at the April meeting about the Higgins Bridge. City staff is still pushing strongly for the shared use path situation and not the on-street bike lane situation for a variety of reasons, but quite simply that we feel that that will be the safest and most accessible design for the most amount of people. And while there might have to be some compromise in some bicycle speeds from the way that people currently ride over the bridge, I think that the majority of people will be willing to do that. I know I myself ride quickly over the bridge because it's so uncomfortable, whereas if I was protected from automobile traffic, I would have no problem going a little slower over the Higgins Bridge. Another is that we actually got out and measured, and the narrowest side of the shared use path side, so the side over by the Missoulian, will be the same width as the Madison Street underbridge. And so basically Higgins will be outfitted with a Madison underbridge on each side. And currently the Madison underbridge sees as much bike ped traffic each day as both sides of Higgins do combined. So in other words, we have the shared use situation would allow for double the amount of bike ped traffic that currently is going over the bridge, and it would feel the same as the Madison Bridge feels today. So that's to staff, that became kind of the driving factor. Now, obviously, we need to pay some attention to the transition points and some delineation to encourage bicycles to travel in the same direction as motor vehicles, but those sorts of design details are further down the road. And so we are still working with MBT and the stakeholder group to get to a shared use path situation. I think that we're likely there. Other updates include May is Bike Month, and so there are a whole variety of events happening. Missoula in Motion publishes a Bike Month calendar. If you're not already signed up for their weekly email, I recommend it. It's a great way to stay on top of, construction and detours, upcoming events and group rides, and different ways to find some other way to go to your destination than driving alone in a vehicle. And so some of the things that have already happened for Bike Month: breakfast on the bridges every Friday. The first one was this past Friday at the Madison Street Underbridge. This coming Friday, we're serving breakfast from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. on the California Street Bridge, assuming that it's still there. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't make that joke on TV, but the river is very high right now. And so there have also, last night was the Commuter Challenge kickoff. So in addition to publishing a Bike Month calendar, Missoula in Motion also hosts a 2-week-long business-to-business commuter challenge to get people to try and bike, walk, bus, telecommute, carpool, or somehow get to work other than alone in a vehicle for 2 weeks, and the business that has the highest percentage of employees that do that wins. And so last night was the kickoff for that. The next 2 weeks, businesses are butting heads on this, and so it's a great way to get people encouraged and moving, and to think about traveling sustainably. There's group rides organized by other people. Pedal Missoula is a new group in town that is focusing a lot on how to transport children by bicycle, and so they're hosting a Kiddical Mass group ride, I believe this coming weekend, but you'll have to look at the calendar to be sure on that. But there's stuff all month long, and so I, again, strongly recommend checking all that out. Also, we're in the midst of construction season, and so even though I think in the fall and winter we provided some good updates on what projects are happening, now that they're actually have broken ground on them, and we're seeing how some of the detours that looked good on paper might be working or not be working as well as we thought. We welcome any and all feedback on that. I take it, although I have to tell you, I do forward it on to Parks and Rec, who manages the trail detours and who is working much closer with the State Department, specifically about the Russell Street detour. Neil Miner with Parks and Rec is working much closer with MDT than I am in managing that, and so I'd love to be aware if you have issues, and I think that there have been some that are getting a little bit better sorted out as construction is a little more ongoing. When the road was only partially torn up, it was really hard to see where the bike ped space was, but now that the road is entirely torn up and there's a sectioned off walkway, it's a little bit easier to tell that, oh, that's what we can use. And then there's still some confusion about which direction do you go on California Street, and so we're working on ways to clear that up. Someone had a good suggestion of adding because the trails all have great logos associated with them, adding stickers of the trails logos to the detour signage so that you know exactly that the detour signs are meant for you as a trail user. I thought that was a good suggestion. I forwarded it on to Neil. I haven't heard if they have issues with it or if the construction company has any issues with it. So the other project that's underway that is super exciting is the Bitterroot Trail completion project. I don't know if you've been out near that triangle at South and Johnson, but those guys are well underway. They're working late into the evenings. They're really moving on getting that done quick, which is very, very exciting. And so I'm no closer to knowing when an actual open date is, but I have heard that we're looking to coordinate the striping of the diagonal crossing in early June. So my guess is that the opening will be shortly after that. As for other striping, our pavement crews, Chad and the guys, are out there going full bore in this warm weather. And so if there are places that you've seen crosswalks worn away or bike symbols or long lines that need refreshed after winter plowing and sweeping, please get me those requests. I tried to, in advance of the committee of the whole meeting, invite you guys to start brainstorming those there. I didn't get to Ryan or Bob in time. So that's something that I'll take those later today or even right after this if you have some in mind. Bob brought Bancroft to our attention, and I think that's going to be swept soon if it hasn't been already, and so we're going to get the guys out striping that. Toole Avenue in the downhill, the westbound direction, is another one where the bike lanes are faded, and that's been swept, so we're going to get those striped real soon. But yeah, Chad told me that they're open to any and all requests for service to touch up existing facilities.
Bancroft from north of south has been swept now, but south of south is not.
Okay.
Is this for bike facilities or for crosswalks as well?
Crosswalks as well, yeah. We're open to any and all.
I would add Spruce and Madison, the crosswalk there. It doesn't appear anymore. It's very, very faded, and I've had a couple of close calls with cars just not thinking that they have to stop. Or not
across Madison or across Spruce?
Across, I don't think there was ever striping across Spruce.
I don't think so either.
Across Madison, if you guys want to add across Spruce, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will. I'll add that to the list. That's a helpful one, and we'll evaluate a crosswalk across Spruce there.
Ben, you'd mentioned the crossing at Russell, the temporary one for the path.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use that a couple times a week because I just go out on the trail, and it's still it's very dicey trying to get people to stop. I mean, you wait and wait and wait, and eventually, if you wave your hands at them, they'll stop. I don't know if there's any kind of yellow diamond sign to put up or something about please stop for peds and bikes and crosswalks.
That sign is there. It just is kind of lost amid all of the construction equipment and everything that's happening. But yeah, those signs are there, and they painted a crosswalk actually on Russell as a temporary measure. But compliance is an issue, and we're aware of that, and we're working on seeing if there's an enforcement piece or what we can try and do to encourage better compliance there. One of the catch-22s with the Russell situation is that we're remedying the fact that there weren't good facilities there in the first place. And because there weren't good facilities there, there's no requirement that the project manager put in temporary good facilities. Whereas if there had been sidewalks there, we would have much better detour routes for bicyclists and pedestrians. But yeah, it's one of the problems of this whole process. But sorry, go ahead, Danny.
I was just going to add the southern exit of Greeno Park. I think that goes across, I think it's Monroe. I don't know.
Vine, maybe?
Vine, yeah. At the intersection with Duncan. That's also worn away, and I think a lot of drivers, especially people who are new to the area, don't even know that there is like a popular path that goes up into the park there.
Yep. Not only that, but that entrance has been some discussion of should we redesign, should we look at something. And this board, I've even brought some of kind of my preliminary thoughts to this board before. I'm just going to call something up. I'm going to call it up on Google Maps and show you some things. There is a Rattlesnake resident who is not shy about coming and talking to me about his ideas, and he's been a city manager at other towns in Montana and is pretty familiar with public works practices and bike facility design and things like that. And so currently this is where the trail pops out, and there's a crosswalk that we've striped here. And with the roundabouts project, they're bringing trail all the way up to right here to the edge of the bridge as part of the roundabouts at Van Buren project. And so one of the things I looked at doing was putting a crosswalk here, putting trail on the bridge, adding sidewalk essentially, and then diving into the park down here. And so that's one thought. That doesn't help get this movement, but it does improve some access to the park. One way that it does is it allows these people to come around and then make a full actual left-hand turn instead of just having to bear right into the park. But there's some thought that just adding the crosswalk here has drawn enough attention to the fact that people are coming up out of here that a kind of expensive project to move the entry to here might not be worth it. But this isn't on the agenda as a discussion item, but it's just something to consider, and something that maybe we can re-add to the June meeting as something to look at a little bit closer. I also am happy to announce that our bike ambassadors have been hired for the summer. We have two women, Erica Johnson and Cheryl Spotted Wolf, and so they start next Monday is their first official day, and they'll have a week of training, and we're excited to get them out on the streets, talking to people, going to events, working at Parks and Rec summer camps, and then this year we're even going to implement a kind of trial run of individualized marketing. So we're going to have them go door to door and offer information and even hand-holding in regards to using sustainable transportation. So we're going to include busing and biking, and basically they're going to follow a mountain line bolt route and say, hey, did you know that you have a bus that runs every 15 minutes in front of your house or within a block of your house? And explain to them how that works, how transfers work, even offer to come and ride with them to a destination. Similarly, show them bike riding routes, offer them lights, some basic maintenance, and even offer to ride with them from their home to work or wherever they want help riding from, so they can see what a safe route might be that looks different than their normal driving route. This sort of program has had a lot of success in different communities all over the world, and it's just kind of starting to get to the United States. But the idea is that it's kind of it's very time intensive and resource intensive as a result of that, but that the sustained change is noticeable. And so even if you get 4% or 5% of people that are all of a sudden more comfortable riding a bike, the research shows that they actually do it 4 months later than just doing, say, an ad campaign or some sort of, the other types of incentive campaigns that we run. So that's pretty exciting. And I guess finally I want to get to budget stuff. So a couple weeks in April were spent kind of furiously writing budget requests. And so last year we wrote a few. We tried to establish a new program to complete bike projects similar to our sidewalk program. Currently, City Council allocates up to $600,000 a year for our sidewalk subsidy program, and that helps offset the cost of sidewalk installation. Typically, that up to $600,000 results in between $800,000 and $1 million worth of sidewalk projects that are city initiated each year, with the remainder coming from assessments to property owners. Similarly, I'm trying to establish, I believe I asked for $200,000 to start doing projects from the Bicycle Facilities Master Plan. Now, these would mainly be crossing projects, so they would benefit pedestrians as well as bicyclists because they would improve safety and accessibility at difficult to cross intersections. And so, as part of that request, I was asked by a council member to include one project from each ward so that all of the city council ward reps would understand what the benefits in their neighborhoods could be. And so those projects, I should have written these down, but the one from Ward 1 is kind of a revision of these two intersections at Broadway, Van Buren, and at Front Van Buren, to reflect a little bit more of actual user behavior. I was not very specific in what the details of the design would be, just that it would improve safety and connectivity for through movements along the trail. Again, it's my belief, I can't see the future, but when these roundabouts go in and this trail is fully constructed up past Gregory Park, it's my belief that the majority of, especially the bike traffic and definitely the pedestrian traffic, is going to be collected on that trail and going to be crossing the street on this side of the right turning cars. And so addressing that issue, that conflict is important to me. So that's one from Ward 1. Ward 2, which is kind of the western part of town, was installing basically buffered bike lanes from Russell Street out to the airport on Broadway. That was called for in the Bike Facilities Master Plan. Ward 3, which is kind of the heart of town, is beginning the 4th Street Greenway project by developing a protected crossing at 4th and Orange. So again, I was not too specific about what the details of that would look like, but it would likely involve some sort of refuge or center median that could prohibit through vehicle movement while allowing through pedestrian and bicycle movement. And it also could have some sort of push button for to kind of get cars to stop. That would be tricky because it would have to coordinate with the signals on each side of that intersection to do that effectively. Ward 4, which is a little further south, this project came out of a grant, and it's also in the Bike Facilities Master Plan, but at Kent and Brooks right here. So what this would do is it would build trail on this side of the road, and then it would have a squared up crossing of Brooks, so you're crossing at a 90, and then it would build trail on this side of the road here. And so you would collect all of the non-motorized users into one large shared use facility, cross at the shortest possible crossing distance, and then have them here, get across this, and then you're into the Kent Central Greenway, neighborhood greenway system. So that is, again, it's an expensive project and largely dependent on MDT, but it's a good example of how these kind of spot projects could really enhance mobility within neighborhoods.
Signalize that, aren't they?
No, it would be either a rapid flashing beacon or a hawk signal or something like that. Yeah, it would not be a full motor vehicle signal.
That may change my route to the post office.
Yeah, that would make it much easier for you, right?
I'm not sure. Well, I usually go south Sussex and
and then
Oxford
up, yeah. Okay.
with the lights. So
let's see, Ward.
Ben, on that last one,
Yeah.
would there be anything on Stevens?
I mean, eventually, yes. I don't know that I called that out in this project. So one of the things that project does is it also, it would include some bulb outs of Stevens and a way to improve, just make you a little bit more visible as you're crossing Stevens here. I've personally found that getting across Stevens, even though it's fairly wide right here, and Stevens is a busy street, it's not too difficult because Brooks is so heavily favored on the green time that this light is red for Stevens for quite a while, and so you have a good gap to cross.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of times I'm buzzing down that to get to the rink, and sometimes with that red light lasting, the cars will back up a little bit, and it's been a little tricky. Sometimes you don't see people that are wanting to cross, but anyways, so I think the Bullbots would help that because it's such a wide intersection.
Yeah.
So a lot of room to look for. So
that's good firsthand knowledge.
Yeah,
and again, these are just kind of example projects. It doesn't mean that each one of these would take a year of funding essentially for the amount that I'm asking for. So this is a ways away. It's just examples of the sorts of projects that could be done if council were to establish a funding source like this. Ward 5 is down this direction, and this one I believe was a trail along Post Siding Road to connect the Bitterroot Trail and the Fort Missoula Regional Park. I believe that Parks and Rec may have submitted this as a CIP as well, but it's one that really to maximize the investment of the trail, the bridge, and the park, we really need a good connection through here. I have felt surprisingly uncomfortable biking on that road before. Motor vehicle drivers use it as a speedway cut through, and so yeah, unfortunately it's a fairly expensive project because of the grades in here. Even though it's flat, there's this ditch, and you're kind of hemmed in by shrubs, and so it's just different grades, and it would take some work to make that. Come on. Why are you being so difficult? There we go. So that is Ward 5, and then Ward 6 is just not too far away on Reserve. It would be moving the current mid-block signal. Moving the signal that's currently mid-block here at CS Porter. It would be getting rid of that and then installing a Hawk signal, so it's still a user-activated signal, but it would be more immediate than the current one at Central. And it would include doing some curb work along Central and making and sidewalk improvements, and then making that a better bike ped crossing than is currently here. Some of the issues with this one include it's a full signal, so one person can push the button and go across, and the amount they're across with plenty of time before the full cycle goes, and so it's causing a lot of delay on Reserve. Another is that as it does not provide any good bike access to the school, and I'm not even sure that this doorway is accessible anymore to students. So anyone who does cross here needs to walk their bikes or ride their bikes through the grass to get over to where their bike parking is, and the main entrance is over here. And so Central would be a much better street to access the main doors of the building. And then the other is that if we were able to do that, there's potential to reuse the signal from here down at Mary Ave, where the new road goes across, goes through the mall. I guess that's this one. And so there's thought that is going to be a fully signalized intersection in the not too distant future. This would, if we did a project to improve the crossing here, we could reuse that signal and save some money on the Mary project. So those are the 6 projects that I included in this request to start a new funding source. I also added each of those projects individually, so that council could choose to fund one or a few, or not. If they didn't want to establish a new program that allocates money for these types of projects in perpetuity, they could fund one or more individually if they're so compelled. I also have asked for an ongoing, I believe I asked for $60,000, although it could be 50 or 75. I kind of forget what I asked for, but some ongoing money for pavement markings, for durable pavement markings, and these would be used for crosswalks and for the bicycle symbols and maybe sharrow, bicycle symbols in bike lanes and for sharrows. And so these are the messages that our current staff has to do by hand. They have to paint them by hand. Even if we have stencils, they need to do traffic control and stop traffic and move it around. And the waterborne paint that they use doesn't last all that long, so they have to go out and do this extra handwork and additional traffic control much more frequently. And so the idea is that if we got to do just those symbols in durable materials, then our crews could spend their time doing the long lines where they can stay in the truck, don't need to do traffic control, be a better use of their time and resources, and we would ensure that things, especially like crosswalks, which are safety improvements, are there throughout the winter. And so I called them durable pavement markings. I didn't specify a material because we're currently, if this was 2 years ago, I would have just said epoxy paint because that lasts 3 to 7 years, and it was the way that we were going. Anymore, what we're finding is that epoxy is getting more and more expensive for this type of handwork because the companies that do it in our state seem to make a lot of their money doing long lines on the highway. And so to mobilize in a city where they have to do traffic control, they're charging commensurately with that. And not only that, but what we're finding is that heat tape is getting better and better. So it's a product that it comes in strips and you lay it down, or it comes shaped as the symbol of a bike. You put it on the ground and then you burn it into the asphalt. You melt it into the asphalt. And so it's a kind of middle ground between the what's called thermoplastic, which is used in the crosswalks downtown. That stuff you actually route out the asphalt and then pour a liquid plastic into, and then it solidifies and hardens. That outlasts our streets. This heat tape lasts similar or a little bit longer than epoxy, and what we're finding is that we're likely going to get better pricing for that on these sorts of messaging applications. So we asked for money to support Chad's office and kind of make him more efficient. Now this is separate. In the past few years, Chad's office has made a request for, I believe, about $25,000 extra dollars, which would allow him to buy a little bit more paint and hire an additional seasonal employee. And I believe that he and John Wilson are making that request again. This is a separate request from that to put down durable pavement markings, specifically bike ped pavement markings. And so that's one that I'd love to see a letter of support for.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, if it would be helpful if we put together a letter of support. But yeah, I would like to.
It would be for any and all of these. That one is actually, because it's materials that degrade over time, it's a new request and not a capital improvement project. These are specifics within the budget language that the city uses, but so council will hear it at a similar time, which is about in June, Wednesdays in June. So having a letter of support for any and all of these would be valuable at that time. And let's see, that's it. I also did one to update the Community Development Block Grant Sidewalk Project, which is completing, that started last year, and we spent some money on design in this fiscal year, and the next fiscal year will be all the construction. It's going to happen this fall, that installs sidewalks on a couple sections of Eaton, some sections of Grant Street and Franklin LaForte, and then Cowper and Sherwood in the west side. Those bids came back recently and unfortunately were much higher than our engineering estimate, and so what it has meant is that we've had to push back a sidewalk project on South Higgins, in this area of South Higgins, that was scheduled to happen. It was on the project list that you guys have seen. These panels were going to get repaired and replaced between South Avenue and Patty Creek, and that project has now been pushed back another year or maybe even longer as a result of the CDBG project costs coming in much higher. And that's my budget update.
I've got two questions.
Yeah.
Are you aware of, can you give an update on if there's any city plans to acquire the 40 acres of Marshall Mountain for a park?
I don't know, and that'd be a better question for Open Space Commission, and the acquisition person, Elizabeth Erickson, is the person who I'd reach out to at the city about that.
And the other is, so somebody has put barbed wire on the end of the Kim Williams Trail where it meets Deer Creek Road. It's a trail that's called maybe Redneck Alley or Redneck something or other. It's past where the turnoff is to go under the railroad.
So yeah, currently there's a new trail that connects here. And then you can also, this has never been legal, but you can go here and past the shooting range.
So as of, I heard about it in April, and I checked it out on Saturday, and there is a 3-strand barbed wire fence running between the railroad tracks and the shooting range fence.
Is it on the east end or the west end of the trail?
It's that, so that is the very east end of the trail. And it's it's probably within the rail link right of way. Although that trail has been there for a very long, like decades amount of time.
Yeah, so do you happen from this map, are you able to identify maybe where approximately it would be?
Yes, I can tell you exactly where it is.
Okay.
It is,
You can see it.
it is further to the east, and it's right where the A is in Association.
Right, oh, really, right near the road?
Yeah, it's the second, yeah, it's probably the second A. It's probably 10 feet from the pavement.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right now so you come up on it, I mean, if you've been traveling that trail for a while, you don't really think there's going to be a fence there, and thankfully someone has put in some like caution tape, but it, either you have to climb the fence, yeah, it's right there. Either you climb the fence or turn around and go back.
Because it goes all the way to their fence?
Yes, it goes from the fence to a place where basically on the ballast rocks, or whatever those rocks are on the very edge of the railroad track.
Okay. And you think it's been there for only a couple months?
I heard about it in April. It looks new, like the wood's new.
Okay. I will figure out more about that and let you guys know.
I'll just throw in my 2 cents worth of it, if it's even worth 2 cents, but that is MRL property. It is posted no trespassing, and it's been tolerated over the years because there was no other way for cyclists or hikers or joggers to get through to Deer Creek Road. But I think with the completion of the underbridge or the underpass to get people out to Deer Creek Road around the Canyon River Golf Course area, they have exercised their right to close that off. Much as we may not agree with it.
Well, but, so even though you can get, I actually really need to get out there. I just don't have a bike to ride from the university to here. Got to talk to Parks about getting that section paved.
So, Bob, you think it's the MRL that put the fence up and not that gun?
I would imagine it's MRL. But so when you cross under here, you have to go around this whole horseshoe. There's no straight shot along the highway, is there? So that would add, I mean, in terms of accessibility, like that's adding a mile or more to your trip probably. And you can still do that, but you just have to come this way instead. Yeah. We've been denied grant applications for trail through this area based on this being considered a commuter route, and so that's one of the reasons that I would personally want to see more pavement more asphalt on the Kim Williams the further east, because it's MBT among others has cited that as the commuter trail route for East Missoula and Bonner, and so then people would need to be able to commute. It is. Just a little smooth. I mean, there's like giant rocks and ruts in it. I don't. Yeah. Either way, whatever the legalities of it are, I'll just learn who put what up and what the situation is, and if there is, I mean, I know that prescriptive easements are a thing, and so if there's any opportunity to exercise that, or yeah, think about ways to make that better and easier to figure out. It seems to me if they're going to block it, the block should be at the turnoff, not all the way at the end, where you'd have to backtrack through that section again.
Yes, both ends should be marked in very conspicuously and thoroughly blocked if they're going to block one end.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to do otherwise.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. A lot of good stuff going on. All right, moving along to new business. We've got the 2018 project list recommendation. Hopefully you guys got the draft that was sent out.
Did that make it into attachments?
Did not. Would you mind pulling it up on the? I printed off a copy before I came.
Is it? I don't know how I'm going to get to it.
It's on the meeting minutes. Sorry. Or yeah, agenda. Anyways, I'd be happy to kind of read through it quick if we want to go. First off, I'll just open it up to anybody. See anything? Want to update anything? I know we went over it at the COW and got it to an okay spot despite computer troubles. But
Is the agenda open? No.
all right, well, I'll just start reading while we're going. So first off, it just states the Missoula Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, BPAB, having considered the matter of the 2018 City of Missoula project list, makes the following recommendations. Number one, whereas BPAB's goal is to advise for the best possible bicycle and pedestrian facilities in Missoula. And two, whereas Missoula has annual opportunities to amend, update, add, and otherwise improve Missoula's facilities through the project list. Three, whereas safety is a primary objective in bicycle and pedestrian facility upgrades. And I didn't have any more whereases. Now therefore, the Missoula Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board recommends that the City of Missoula Public Works Department improve the following projects for bicycle and pedestrian facilities while working hard to improve our transportation network in general this construction season of 2018. Good so far. Oh, nice. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, and then, quite honestly, I have had a chance to pour over this quite a bit, but I haven't had a chance to look at your recommendation. Are there any major changes from this to the recommendations?
I don't think so. Or no, Corey, go ahead.
I do have a question about, on the Turner Street. I noticed in the minutes from last month, there was something about, that's a designated truck traffic, keep cyclists away. As a resident of the neighborhood, I can promise you, you're not going to be able to do that. So I don't know what, I haven't had a chance to watch the meeting, so I don't know what was discussed about that, whether this is something that, that's in my neighborhood I wanted to talk about since we were on this. It doesn't look like it's on the recommendation, though, but I don't know what was.
It wasn't a suggestion to keep cyclists away. It was, do we want to pursue adding bike lanes and removing a parking lane along a neighborhood street, even though it is functionally classified as a collector, so it rises to the level of being considered for bike lanes. Do we want to, it's narrow enough that it would require removing parking from one side of the street. And so do we want to go through that process of trying to remove parking from one side of the street on Turner to add bike lanes when there aren't even sidewalks on that street, and for the whole length of it, and it is a truck route, and so there is heavy truck traffic. And so it's a kind of toss-up. I totally would want to hear what you have to say as a North Sider. I lived there for 10 years too, and I was on the fence about it. Council person Heidi West lives on Turner and thinks that we could totally remove a lane of parking and add bike lanes to that street, and thinks that it has some value and some merit. So it's fine if it doesn't land on the final recommendation. It's something that I'm still going to I plan on exploring the possibility, if not pushing super hard for it right this minute. It's something that we're still going to explore.
Thanks for clarifying that for me, Ben.
Yeah, no problem.
Wasn't there something else with, I can't remember which street is one further north, but that was identified in the bicycle facilities master plan as a eventual either neighborhood greenway or just bicycle route? I can't remember how it was classified. But. So
it was identified, and that really came out of tying into the North Reserve Scott Street master plan, which the Missoula Redevelopment Agency put out a couple years ago, which suggested that Palmer Street should be one that goes through this way and connects over into, the mouse is being sticky today, but that connects over through that kind of empty space and connects up to the other streets over Rogers and Shakespeare and Bulwer and those. And so there's still some discussion. There we go. Personally, I like Turner as the connection through there. There's some hesitation from the police department and City Public Works because their shops are all back there, and so they'd have to add quite a bit of security, and don't necessarily want the general public driving through where they're driving their big trucks out of, and I kind of get that. At the same time, it's already paved. To me, this is already the major route through town. Asking people to drive up to Palmer to then cut up this way just doesn't make as much sense. Also, the Palmer has part of a park on it, and so I don't think politically that is ever really going to get punched through, but we'll see. I know that was a kind of big debate during the Scott Street North Reserve master planning process. And what I heard loud and clear from council is we shouldn't let those lines on a map for the future determine whether or not we try and add bike lanes to Turner now.
Where's the new development coming in, the big one?
So there's currently a big development underway right here. This is called the Clausen site, and these are, I believe there's like 50 homes here, but then the one, if you're referring to the one in the paper today, that is at this parcel right here.
Okay.
And so that project, and it's not on this map, but there is existing right-of-way that comes through the backside here. And so there was some discussion. The developer wanted that right-of-way vacated, and so in return, there's going to be trail constructed along Otis to get people, again, if the master plan ever comes to fruition, there's trail / separated bike lanes on new streets going all the way up through here, connecting to North Reserve in several places and to the Grant Creek Trail. That's kind of the master
2019, right?
vision. Yeah. That would be something.
Of course, yeah, other than Turner, I don't think anything was too different. Yeah, we definitely talked about England Boulevard quite a bit, but I think I think we landed on what's here in the notes. Anything else that jumps out at people? Perfect.
I think it matched up pretty well to my recollection. I didn't compare. I didn't have this in front of me, so I couldn't compare, but recollection says it matched in pretty well to what our last discussion was.
Yeah, I'm doing a quick scan and I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, and so Scott Street, roundabout to Broadway. Did we discuss, removing parking east side of the street, add bike lanes in each direction. So that's where the board landed with that one. Did we have discussion at the April meeting about some of the challenges with that at all?
Yes, there was. I don't recall exactly where it went.
I feel like in general, when we were talking about that area, removing it on the east side of the street, it didn't affect any, or didn't appear to affect much where the grocery store, where Missoula Fresh Market is. And then there are a couple residences that would be affected by that. But if my recollection is on, I think they all had driveways going into parking garages. But maybe we could pull it up and double check.
They do. Here are what some of the... So one of the issues with the east side is that the parking lane intersects with this bulb out right here as you approach the intersection. And so removing that parking and having the bike lane curbside here runs the bike lane into the curb as it comes. And obviously you would drop the bike lane in advance of this intersection, but you're still then forcing the bicyclist has to move over and merge into traffic as they're approaching that. And the speed differential as they're going uphill might be kind of high between a driver and a bicyclist. And then the other consideration with this one is that as we approach Broadway, the bike lane doesn't really help anything because the movement is either a left or a right. And so you're and currently it's only striped as one vehicular lane, but right turning vehicles, single passenger cars, not big trucks, sneak over to the right and create a de facto right-hand turn lane there. And so, but the bike lane doesn't, if you brought it up to the intersection, where do you go? Either you're in the right side and you're making the right turn, or you're to the left side and you're getting in front of traffic and you're making the left turn. And so one of the thoughts that we had was that potentially this street does not need double yellow lines because it's fewer than 6,000 cars per day. And so you would only need some coming off the end of the splitter, for a car length or two right here, and then for a car length or two at the intersection down at Broadway. But in the interim, this could be a location for advisory bike lanes where we leave the parking on both sides and put in a solid stripe to lock in the parking width, and then about 6 feet in from that solid stripe would be a dashed stripe on the inside, and then there would be so that's where bikes would be, and then the area between that, which is narrower than 2 full travel lanes, would be a shared space for bidirectional car traffic.
I see in the minutes from last month, it was commented on and noted, but it was
Ultimately rejected? Okay. Well, we will definitely take the board's recommendation under advisement and continue to look at what staff feels is the best solution for improving bike travel in that area.
Ben, in terms of the advisory bike lanes, I'm not sure if there's a standard for it or not. And if so, does it include stenciling bike symbols into the dashed?
Yes, it usually does.
Okay, you're allowed to, okay.
Yeah. And the standards, again, they're guidelines, not standards, and there's kind of minimum and maximum widths for that shared center lane, and this falls right in the range.
All right, anything else?
Yeah, Garrett Street.
Okay.
39th to Garland, remove parking on both sides and add bike lanes in both directions. Bob, did you look at widths and just determine that was necessary? The parking removal on both sides is necessary on Garrett there?
I didn't check any widths, no.
Okay. Do you happen to remember what discussion might have led to suggesting parking removal on both sides?
My recollection is a meeting, probably a couple COW meetings ago, starting to look at those widths and yeah, determining that removing it on one side would only allow, I think, bike lane on one side, and I believe there was some discussion about people coming down from the hill, people, I know it's flat on that section relatively, but yeah, I guess.
Okay.
I think there was something about maybe the width of the bike lane too, that if it was only removed on one side of the street, the width was only going to be like 3 to 4 feet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we'll look closely at it. I was just curious if there's something that you some major reason why that needed removed on both sides.
And then I think similarly to the portion on Scott Street, in looking at that whole stretch, it appeared that most, if not all, of the residences there had driveways and parking areas, and that I think when people had either driven or ridden down, hadn't noticed much parking on that stretch. So that's my recollection.
Okay.
I think our general consensus was let's stick to the bicycle facilities master plan unless there's a compelling reason to not deviate from it.
Again, I wasn't not quite familiar with the recommendation from that specific place, but that is one of the recommendations there.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right, Danny. And I think as we were going over this at the COW meeting, in general, talking about, well, we understand this is a recommendation. Let's put it out there. Let's see what is possible, what the best possible bicycle pedestrian facility could be, and kind of no harm in recommending in a way.
Great.
So is everybody good with what we've got? Okay. Only, little things that are different from the draft that I would add. I realized I didn't put in a topic description, so I just wrote down here that this is in the very first paragraph. The 2018 City of Missoula project list will get inserted there. under number 2, whereas, take out one of the Missoulas. And then I had a question overall in the document, Ben, I forget the terminology. Do we want to say bike lanes or do we want to say bicycle lanes? Or does that matter?
I'm not sure that matters. For like policy that gets written or added to code, we spell it out entirely, or at least that's kind of the direction we're going, but I'm not sure that matters in this context.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Ben, just on the, on this, under Hillview, Hillview Way, says under the plan, revised striping plan to bring bike lanes through intersection. Does that mean the line for the lane will?
No, it just, currently the plan just drops the bike lanes 100 feet before the intersection.
Oh,
And so bringing them up actually to the intersection
where the
and then
crosswalk-
beginning them on the other side.
Okay.
Right at the intersection.
Okay.
And I actually have an update on that, and so that is because those are going to be done in epoxy this year, those lines, and we've revised the striping plan to include bike lanes in most directions. Well, really, it's the northbound approach as you get towards 39th that is really being done, and so we're able to do a little bit on the southbound on Russell as well. So coming over here, what we are going to see at this intersection is the bike lane brought up alongside the right turn lane right here. So it will be similar to South Avenue and Bancroft right now, where the bike lane drops, it's dashed for 50 to 75 feet and then picks up again on the other side of the turn lane. And then on this side, there's going to be, the bike lane will begin at about the end of the turn radius, and there's going to be a buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane for a while until the width drops a little further up the road, and then the bike lane will be adjacent to the travel lane. The buffer will shrink. On this side of the intersection, sharrows are going to get added into the left-hand side or maybe even center of the right turn lane, so that through bike movement gets picked up right over here. That's similar to 3rd Street now at either Russell or at Reserve. That treatment is done. And then on this side, we're going to have bike lane start right here and a short buffer, and then on this side of the driveway, the bike lane picks up, and we're going to work on narrowing this travel lane up and, having the buffer extend until the bike lane picks up. We'll tie it into the existing striping just north of the gas station there.
Yeah, I was just confused by the word through intersection. I just thought it would be, parallel to the crosswalk line. I thought that's going to be a little confusing.
Yeah, no,
I wouldn't want to do that.
Sorry about that, but yeah, I just meant up to the intersection as opposed to today. As you can see, the bike lane here, it drops right there, picks up here. In this direction, it does come up like that, but in this direction it drops, and since there wasn't any work being done to Southwest Higgins or 39th, we're not able to change that at all. We can look into adding a sharrow similarly in that right lane, but I'm not sure that we're going to get it in epoxy as part of this project because it's a little out of the scope of Hillview Way.
Awesome, thanks, Ben. So if we're good with this, with a few minor tweaks, does anybody want to entertain a motion?
I'll move that we approve the draft with the amendments yet to be made, to be forwarded to Public Works.
Thanks, Bob. Do we have a second? Thanks, Corey. All right. Any further discussion? Excellent. All in favor? signal with. Any opposed? Wonderful. Motion passes. Thank you. I'll type up the little edits that we talked about and we'll ship it off. So thanks you guys. All right, moving on. Admin Rule 415 discussion. And I actually, just to back up, Ben, I want to thank you for doing what you're doing and submitting as much influence as you can on the bicycle and pedestrian facilities and all the projects. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so Admin Rule 415. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll provide a little background on this.
Right,
So,
thanks.
Admin Rule 415 was established way back in 2008 before sharrows were even an accepted treatment, pavement marking that was allowed in the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So before there was any national guidance on them, there were some cities that were using them. Missoula thought, oh, we'll get out and ahead of that and we'll put in our own internal administrative rule that will kind of guide how we put these down so that when we do put them down, it's defensible both to the public and, God forbid, in a court situation. So a year after we adopted this, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices came out and had its own guidance for when and where you use sharrows, and we never really updated ours to reflect it. It was mostly in line with what became federal guidelines or standards, but there are a few things that were different. Now, fast forward, another 8 or 9 years, and we have largely decided that sharrows are not a substitute for actual dedicated bike facilities, that they do provide good education to both cyclists and motorists about roadway position and about the fact that we can expect bicycles on certain roadways and in certain locations, but that and that if we don't apply them correctly, they wear out really quickly. And so we still want some amount of guidance on when and where we put them down. The other big development that necessitates kind of rewriting this administrative rule is the adoption of the Bike Facilities Master Plan, which recommends using or establishing a network of neighborhood greenways, so local streets that can have pavement markings to guide bicycle travel. And previously, Admin Rule 415 only referred to collectors and arterials because the thought was that would be the only places that we would use these sorts of pavement markings. But the reality is that level of traffic stress, the model at which we're looking at our network for bike riding, recommends that to kind of create low stress environments for folks, we create bike facilities on roads that we wouldn't have thought to create them before. And so part of the revisions are to incorporate what we've learned in these past few years. And so level of traffic stress analysis and the potential for using pavement markings, including sharrows, on local streets and not just arterials and collectors. And then just slightly better practical guidelines for staff to use when going about installing these things. So I'm not sure if everyone has had a chance to read through this, but I'll just kind of quickly go through what's included in the admin rule. The format is largely uniform to other administrative rules around town or within the city, but if there are things that strike you as odd or is in a weird location, please feel free to comment and we'll see if it's worth moving stuff around. So the purpose statement states very plainly that this policy is intended to help staff implement our Complete Streets policy and our Bicycle Facilities Master Plan by guiding the evaluation of the feasibility of installing on-street bike facilities and bicycle-related pavement markings following maintenance in specific locations throughout the city. And then we have just a couple definitions. The previous administrative rule used to include definitions of what a bike lane is and what a sharrow is and that sort of thing. Those all they're well defined in other places, and so in my mind, the only definitions that were worth including here were level of traffic stress, since that is a newer concept that was really introduced in the Bike Facilities Master Plan, and neighborhood greenways, which have been introduced as a concept a little bit longer than that, but are not really solidified in any other internal documents other than our planning documents. So applicability, this policy is applicable to all collector. Oh, look at that. So this is a sentence that, how about this administrative rule is applicable to all roadway facilities. Oh. Within city limits. Does that, I guess I kind of wanted to get away from collectors and arterials, but what do people think of that? And then all staff shall abide by this policy, and then consideration of bicycle facilities should be given on a block-by-block basis. And that is really to allow for contextual differences in roadway width, and as you approach intersections, and different kind of levels of treatment or different ways to mark the pavement as you encounter different characteristics. It says that we'll adhere to the manual for uniform traffic control devices with additional reference to the following design guide manuals. And so it's the AASHTO Green Book, essentially. There is a bike facility design guide too, which maybe I should add to that. But then the Federal Highway Administration, small town and rural multimodal networks, the NACTO design guidelines, and the U.S. DOT's policy statement on bike and pedestrian accommodation regulations and recommendations. The old Admin Rule 415 had a kind of odd reference to public process. It basically said that if parking is removed, there should be public process followed, but it never specified what that is or what that looks like. We feel this is our first stab at better defining that while still leaving it vague enough to kind of apply a different public process to different scale of projects. But if there are better ways that people can think about saying that, or if we should provide more specificity about what to do when adding a bike facility, staff is all ears on that. And then we go, I've divided it, marking new bike lanes. So talks about what a bike lane is. Bob added the comment that we should discuss, be very clear about widths in this section, where we state that kind of 4 foot no curb, 5 foot with curb, 6 foot if there's parking, and that those are minimums, not necessarily desired. We'd probably want about a foot wider on each of those, 6 inches to a foot wider in each of those situations. I referenced the complete streets policy, which also had not been passed, either of them, by the time when we initially wrote Admin Rule 415. So using that again as a reason to drive this. Also, rather than specifying in this document what facility goes where, I'm referencing the facility selection chart from the Bicycle Facilities Master Plan, and that is, just for a refresher, that looks like, let's see, where is it? Here, so this looks at the number of lanes. Does that go away? The number of lanes, the average annual daily traffic, in vehicles per day, and then posted travel speeds. And this then has facility types over here. So rather than try and spell all of this out in the admin rule, I just reference this document and say that we should adhere to this.
It seems that this is different than the flow chart at the end of the admin rule.
Yes, that flow chart has not been updated from the old admin rule, and that's one of the things that I'm going to get to. And so I even have a beginnings of a draft of a new flow chart that I brought with me that I'll pass around. But that's one of the things that I want us to discuss today is what could that look like and what would be the most useful way to have a chart that staff can follow for that. So going back to the document, and then in addition to the characteristics that are laid out there, the volume, speeds, and number of travel lanes, we should also look at connections to other facilities, safety, parking, and here we are, we kind of are very clear that on-street parking removal can be a controversial subject and therefore requires a public process in which parties affected by removal of parking and this, Bob, I really appreciate this addition, and potential users of improved facilities are involved. See chart below for more detail. And so, again, we haven't updated the chart yet to see below, and that's part of what we want to get at today. And so this does make reference to the kind of upper limits then at bike lanes, just so that we are, we're again being clear that if we're getting above this many travel lanes or speed or average annual daily trips, that we should be considering greater separation, whether it's a buffer or physically separated bike lane or even a side path. Parking removal determination, this kind of spells out the process by which staff estimates if we can remove parking or not. And so these are, this might not be an exhaustive, but it's very close list of things that we consider. So vehicle volumes, travel speeds, estimated bicycle volumes, importance of the connection, adjacent land uses, and then why that's important is that typically residential has lower utilization and lower turnover rates, whereas commercial and civic uses have higher utilization rates and higher turnover. And so that potentially in a residential area, the parking might be easier to pull because it's utilized less, or it's less important to remove it because it's utilized less, whereas when you're in a commercial area and there's a lot of cars moving in and out of the bike space, then it creates a safety issue having the parking there. Presence and availability of off-street parking spaces along the corridor in question, current utilization rates, number of parking spaces to be removed, percentage of on-street parking spaces to be removed within an 1/8 mile of the corridor. This is one of the ways that we talked about Bancroft a few years ago and were able to convince council that this was a worthwhile project. So we removed parking from one half of the street. The neighbors were saying, you can't take half our parking away, or a couple neighbors were saying, you can't take half of our parking away. But when you look at the number of on-street parking spaces just within an 1/8 of a mile of that roadway, it was actually only about 4% of the on-street parking spaces that were being removed. And when council saw that, it became a no-brainer for them. Estimated increase in bicycle ridership with improved facilities. That's a difficult one to do, but one that we, as we collect more and more data, and we hear anecdotally that more people use bike lanes, it's easier to estimate that. Presence of a parking district and impacts to parking commission. We can't just I can't make the decision, and even engineering can't just make a decision to remove a whole bunch of the parking commission's leased parking spaces that they count on for revenue, that sort of thing. Other planned projects in the vicinity that might affect parking, maybe it will be easier to remove parking to put in bike facilities if we know that there's a garage going up in 6 months, the next block over, that sort of thing. And then the ability of traffic services staff to paint and maintain the pavement markings. So what is the burden that this is putting on existing staff? And then potential impacts to snow and leaf collection and other roadway maintenance. If there's other things that we should be considering, again, we're all ears on that as well. Shared lane markings. So the next section goes into sharrows, talks about what they are. Bob, I like all your language improvements here. I think that this sort of, we try and get away from using motorists and bicyclists in our kind of general speech, because we're all people I don't think any of us uses one mode of transportation every single time, but in a kind of technical document like this that is for staff to use, I think it's totally fine to use that. So thanks for making those edits there, Bob. And so then we're very clear that sharrows should be used only when the bike facility that would provide the lowest level of traffic stress and highest level of safety cannot be established on the target road segment. Again, that was an addition to make sure that we weren't just throwing sharrows down because they were less controversial and calling it good and saying, hey, look, we added a bike facility. It's not the same. But some examples where that would be roadways with observed speeds below 35 and no room for dedicated bicycle lanes. In the downhill direction, when it can be reasonably assumed that many bicyclists will operate at close to the posted speed limit. So it doesn't mean just a 2% slope that is basically flat, that sort of thing. When bike lanes end near approaches to major intersections, so as you've seen just in the Hillview Way and the 3rd Street examples we're talking about, that's becoming an acceptable use. To encourage through movement of bicycles at intersections by placing the markings on the left side of the right turn only vehicle lane. That's, again, another version of that same bullet point. And then along neighborhood greenways, and so this is kind of a new usage and one that by establishing in this admin rule, hopefully it will lead us to start actually implementing neighborhood greenways. And so then we're also clear about where there may not be appropriate, where observed vehicle speeds exceed 35 miles an hour. An established parallel low-stress route is easily accessible and located 1 block away or closer. That was kind of our reasoning for not adding them to Mary Avenue a couple years ago, when that was going to be, when that design was being considered between the Bitterroot Trail and Reserve Street, because anyone accessing Reserve, they're perfectly allowed to ride in the lane, whether or not their sharrow's down, and we thought that the most comfortable route would be along the trail or along some of the other streets there that are not new collectors. And then anywhere where site obstructions may cause may cause situations where installation of sharrows would be inadvisable. That was a holdover from the last one. An example of a location that comes to mind is the railroad bridge on Highway 200 on East Broadway as you're headed into East Missoula. I'm not sure that sharrows are the appropriate treatment there. Speed limit is 35, so the speeds can be higher, and the visibility is such that that I don't know that the placement of sharrows helps. Now, I personally do take the lane through that, but I hear from a lot of people that they don't. So I'm not sure. Gene.
Yeah, Ben, because you mentioned the observed vehicle speeds, I just kind of throw up my hands a little bit at that. So you're saying, we're going with the understanding that the speed limits are essentially not really very well enforced or enforceable. So we're saying, well, if we have seen cars going at 40 or 45 in a 35 zone, we're going to go with what the cars go, not what the speed limit is. It's kind of like we're kind of giving up to the people who decide not to abide by speed limits. Secondly, I would like to add with the site obstructions, I guess I'm assuming that these are obstructions that can't be readily resolved by whatever.
Like trimming trees or something, yeah, exactly. Right, and that's why I pointed out that East Missoula railroad track situation.
Right.
By observed vehicle speeds, I I mean, I guess it's technical document, so I can add technical language in here, but I was thinking 85th percentile, not just one car happened to go that fast. And I was thinking for kind of the opposite situation where the speed limit might be lower and might not be enforceable, but that everyone is traveling faster than that. Again, no examples really come to mind, but we just don't want regular traffic traveling 40 and having sharrows on the road in that situation. That just doesn't. No, we're just making clear in areas where we wouldn't put them. So the city will document all cases where decisions made to not include bicycle markings on a collector or arterial. Placement of markings. This is where we get to, so this language is minimums, and this is directly lifted from the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So these are minimums that we have to meet. Now, Bob made a comment that those minimum distances typically in practical application put you right in the right tire track, which as we've seen leads to them disappearing rather quickly. And so that's why my first paragraph here is the city shall make efforts to place pavement markings to minimize scrubbing by tires and to encourage safe riding, including taking the lane when applicable. Field judgment should determine placement as close to these guidelines as possible. And so, again, these are minimums. Bob, is your suggestion here that we increase the minimums or just acknowledge a little bit better that these are minimums, or what's your thought there?
I guess just acknowledge more emphatically that they are minimums as specified in MUTCD, and that they can exceed that easily given specific sites and situations.
Okay.
I would say to ask for, improving on the minimum standards in order to do what you were just saying, keep the markings between tire tracks to make them last longer, and to keep the people on bikes from getting shuffled to the edge where people tend to buzz them, perhaps, especially on the roads where it's 30, 35, etc. So I don't know what the best wording for that is, but I think I don't know that you would necessarily have to say, well, we're now going to make the minimum locally, we're going to make the minimum here, but simply to strongly advise going to these other criteria of placement that we've put forth.
Okay, yeah, and that's one where the AASHTO design guide has a little bit of specificity about road, like where the sharrow goes depending on width of the travel lane as well. And so if the travel lane is 14 feet or greater, and this is where in any travel lane narrower than 14 feet, recommended placement is at least 4 feet from the face of curb, but may be shifted further into travel lane to avoid obstacles near the curb. But if the travel lane is 14 feet and it's adjacent to the curb, they recommend that that's where the sharrow goes. And basically that the sharrow indicates a narrow curbside bike lane. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but because why wouldn't you just allow a 4-foot bike lane then and a 10-foot travel lane? Yeah. But again, this is language from federal standards that the city has to adhere to. We can improve upon them, sure.
Exactly. And we should maybe make that city policy to improve.
Yeah.
To improve on them and not just say, well, okay, we're going to do the minimum. I would even like to put forth the idea that on some of the roads where they're state roads or whatever, and they come in, well, we're going to do all the lane markings. Hopefully we can just say, well, if that's what you're going to do, let us do the lane marking so that they really serve the people, the people who on bikes and in cars for that matter, to as we see best. We're not asking to change their minimums, but we want to go with a better system and state that very clearly and actually make it a requirement.
So an example of a place where they were put maybe in poor locations recently was Orange Street between 1st and 6th. So the state came in after their repaving project and put them basically smack dab in the right tire track. Now, they were open to putting them somewhere else, but that met the exact language from where they put them, met the exact language from here. We told them they're going to scrub away. And they said, well, the lanes have shifted a little bit. Maybe let's put them there for a season and see where they are. And then if they need to be redone next year, we'll allow you to move them. So that's a conversation that Chad and I are having, is how can we get them, how can we put them back now in the center of that travel lane instead of in the right tire track?
The other one is on the new Madison paving up to the bridge northbound. There's a Cheryl that's, again, I guess it meets the minimum of 4 feet from the center to the curb face, but it is, again, worn out very much. And that's a very narrow lane as that curves up there. And any bicycle that follows that Cheryl where it is definitely going to get squeezed by cars, especially bigger ones.
Yeah, that travel lane goes from about 17 or 18 feet wide down to 14. And so that one, I'm pretty sure they're like the first couple sharrows are off the curb a little bit, but then as they get closer to where the two roads come together, it's supposed to be curbside. The sharrow is there. I would encourage people to take the lane if they feel comfortable. Yeah, I don't see why that couldn't have been an extra foot wider and then gotten a bike lane all the way in there, but that was built before my time. We also make mention in this that Montana Code Annotated allows motorists to cross the double yellow line to pass a bicyclist if they can do so safely. That's something that I think that people who haven't taken the driving test in a long time don't know. That rule was changed in 2015 to specifically allow motorists to cross the double yellow to overtake a bike rider. We also, the previous Admin Rule 415 did not include information about frequency of application, or if it did, it was contradicted by the MUTCD. So this again is the language straight from the manual. Place the marking 50 feet towards the center of the roadway segment from the inside of crosswalks, and they should be spaced at intervals not exceeding 250 feet. And so the way that this typically plays out when we use them is that there would be one right at the start of a block, and then one near the end of that block, and then the next one would be in the middle of the next block, and then the next block would have two in the block, and so you'd get 3 sharrows per every 2 blocks, based on our typical block length in the city of Missoula, and that meets the not less than 250. The other way it's our thought that would make more sense than putting one sharrow at the beginning of each block and only having one per block.
I'm not sure the way this is currently worded that is clear. It does say sharrows should be placed immediately after each intersection, and spaced at intervals not exceeding 250 feet thereafter. Right.
So our intersections are typically about 300 feet long.
Okay.
And so if you place them 50 feet towards the center of the roadway, we would exceed 250 to put it at the next intersection. So we're keeping our spacing at about 200 feet, essentially.
So the first one is in a roadway, the first one would be at the first intersection. The next one would be 200 feet beyond that, which would still be within that first block.
Yep. the next one would be about 250, or 200 feet beyond that, which would be in the middle of the next block.
But that is violating the placed immediately after each intersection.
You would have basically two per block.
2 per block, okay.
Yeah.
All right, how do we feel? Again, that's a should. Here's a location. Here's Beckwith. So here we have 1, 2, and then 3, 4. Okay, so far, and then the next block, there's 1, and then we get to Brooks. So then these ones are probably worn away.
I'm not sure there are any on that side of Brooks.
Oh, there should be. So yeah, that's a location. So do you think then, Bob, that we should make a comment that this typically means 2 per block in Missoula's blocks?
Well, no, I think if the wording stays as it is, then you get 1 at the start of each block and 1 near the end of each block.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have 2, since our blocks are, you said 250 feet?
Yeah.
200, 300, yeah. So the second one is just a reminder within that first block.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there wouldn't be any blocks shorter than 250 feet, so you're always going to have...
Yeah, there aren't many blocks I know of that are shorter than that. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll have to look closer at that. I'm sure Chad will be a little bit bummed that means more.
I'm sorry.
more painting, but yeah.
Yeah, especially the hand painting of the Sharrows.
Yep. Again, all the more reason that we're trying to get those durable pavement markings. The other thing I wanted to add to this one was advisory bike lanes. Since we have really no local policies that reference them, I figured this could be the first. And so I make specific reference to the manual for uniform traffic control devices here. And then this talks about the widths and the 2-lane travel width, and here's the basically a 2-way travel lane width of 13.5 to 16 feet, and notes that the design may function, that's the ideal, and then the design can function with widths of 10 to 18. When you get to, I would even make that 19, because when you get to 20, then you can have 2 10-foot travel lanes. And so then it becomes less necessary to have the advisory bike lanes. You can just have bike lanes and travel lanes. And then,
I'm sorry, just
go ahead.
I think, I don't know where I read it or heard it, but one of the things about having the advisory bike lanes, don't they in some ways act like traffic circles to act as traffic calming device? It's almost like you're approaching a 1-lane bridge. You kind of really slow down and check out what's going on.
That's been the effect that cities are noticing with them, and why people seem to be thrilled about them so far. We just haven't tried one. They seem to be being utilized in places that are either more urban or more rural than Missoula is. That it's, in the heart of Minneapolis, or it's in Sandpoint, Idaho. It's in rural New Hampshire and in DC, and it's places that have potentially some different characteristics, but that the report that came out about them, and the more we learn about them, the more we think that it's a good new tool to the toolkit.
What does that mean that an approved request to experiment is required?
So they're not officially allowed in the MUTCD. So what Federal Highways makes you do is you need to tell them that we're requesting to use this traffic treatment, and then we tell them we have to submit basically our plans to them, and then they say go ahead. And typically you do some sort of study along with it, like a before and after speed counts, or before and after bicycle usage, or safety, look at crashes or something. So we've done a request to experiment on the green paint in the North Higgins lanes, because before that was fully allowed. Now that it has been granted full approval, but before green paint was allowed in bike facilities, we had to request to experiment. And so we got approval and did a study project on what a motorist think of it, what a bike riders think of it, is it leading to any behavior differences, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess I think it would be cool if advisory bike lanes was numbered 2 and Sharrows were numbered 3.
Okay.
To sort of, I guess, change the perception of, well, what comes next if dedicated bike lanes don't work. That's just my personal opinion. And I obviously maybe trying to work that into the flow chart at the end as well, like where do advisory bike lanes come in? Just looking at the designs of it and looking, I guess, briefly at the data that's come out of it, it would be interesting to see that more often around Missoula. I guess I'm just personally not really into Sharrows, but I think the data supports it as well.
Okay, so I'm going to pass this around. So this is kind of the new way of doing what I'm thinking of doing the flow chart. I'll give you guys a couple.
Thank you.
Ben, I just want to add or put in a little bit of a counterpoint to Danny in terms of prioritizing the advisory bike lanes over Sharrows. The one thing, and again, I know that, you know, talking to different people and whatever, it's until you get used to it and have a little more confidence, it's nerve-wracking to be in the middle of a traffic lane. I do it on Mound Avenue all the time. I see a lot of people hugging the curb there. But the one thing, the one advantage, assuming that the speed limits are about the same, 30 or 35, the advantage to the Sharrows, which puts you out more in the center of the road, I think it does. I would think it would have a tendency to reduce the occasion for right hooks and left crosses simply because of better sight lines when you have meeting other vehicles at intersections. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay, yeah, one of the other pieces of that is that advisory bike lanes are seemingly only, so far what I've seen, they're only used on lower speed and lower, I mean, the volumes by definition need to be lower than 6,000 cars per day, so Mount Ave or somewhere like that wouldn't be a candidate. And then speeds are typically 20 or 25 on roads with advisory bike lanes, whereas Sharrows can be used, even though I don't like them terribly, they can be used on roads up to 35 miles an hour. But I still do like, it seems to me just from a perspective to go bike lane, advisory bike lane, Sharrow as a kind of level of separation that you're afforded as a bike rider, even if there are conditions where a Sharrow might be the only thing that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see what these municipalities, with these areas that have begun with advisory bike lanes, what their experience has, you know, whether they've used them as a replacement or instead of Sharrows or to complement Sharrows, or
yeah,
it'd be interesting to see the studies that come out of it.
So what you're looking at there with the kind of new flow chart, this is the kind of update to what we have here. I think that this is a little too much information, and potentially the one that I've created is a little too little information, but are there certain questions that you think should be asked in this? Also keeping in mind that the determined feasibility star and then the items for parking removal, and then a star down at the bottom. If you flip over the page, began the list of same criteria that were from the kind of center of the document. That will get filled in, but are there other things that you think should be asked through this flowchart process based on what you saw in the language of the admin rule itself?
I don't know if I'm reading this right, but is there on-street parking which can be removed or reconfigured to make room for bike lanes? The new flow chart says yes, determine feasibility. Would that be yes for bike lanes?
That would mean, yeah, so, but up above I have it determined by the facility type, so, oh, but that's only what type of facility is recommended. So, yeah, yes and no. Yes means determine that means, is there on-street parking? Does on-street parking exist? That could be, yeah. And so if it does, then determine feasibility of removing it.
Okay. And so in the old flow chart, the same question, if the answer is yes, it just says stripe with bike lanes, I think.
Okay, let's see. Is there on-street parking which can be, oh, yeah. So that's assuming then that the feasibility has already been done. And that's the part in the process where the process kind of broke down on the Linda Vista situation, and where this board has previously recommended that we be a little bit more transparent in how we're making that determination, and then how we're selling that to the, how we're engaging with the public. And so maybe this was a preliminary attempt to try and install some of that into the process. So are there ways that we can, should we reword the question to say, have you determined if removal is feasible? Or, I mean, should we dumb it down for future staff to follow?
My first impression is that if the answer to the question is yes, then it is feasible. It's just whether there's significant or vocal opposition to it. And so, I mean, I agree that, yes, stripe with bike lanes probably isn't the ideal way of proceeding in all situations, like when you're removing parking. But I would say yes, or consult, or do like a local consultation, or a local, I don't know. First, just the determined feasibility sort of seems to be assuming that the answer isn't yes, that there isn't parking that can be removed. Because you're saying it, if you're determining feasibility, then you're saying that you're not sure if it's feasible. Sorry.
No, it makes sense. And when I was, and again, when I was going through this question, I was thinking of Orange Street or Mount Ave, like there is not on-street parking which can be removed or reconfigured to install bike lanes. Like, so if going down this chart, what type of facility is recommended in the bicycle facilities master plan? Bike lanes. Is there enough room to be bike lanes to be striped without changing lanes or parking? No. Can driving lanes be narrowed to make room for bike lanes? No. Is there on-street parking which can be removed? No.
So then you wouldn't determine the feasibility, because you're already saying it's not feasible.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sorry,
No, it's a good, I mean, it's semantics, but it's worth being clear about.
Which might be removed, as opposed to can be removed. Sorry.
Okay, is there on-street parking which might be removed?
That implies there's still a decision, a discussion, a process to be taken to determine whether it can be or not, as opposed to whether there's physically, if there's physically parking there.
Yeah,
which is
okay.
your issue on Mount. There isn't, so.
Which might be removed, and then I guess one of the other pieces of this is we talked about, like, what exactly does that process look like? Currently it's been, I do up a mock-up of both a cross-section of the existing and then the future roadway, and then an overhead, I put it in Publisher and I draw lines on the roadway and bring that around door to door to the places where people are gonna have their parking removed, and explain the reason, what's happening, what the policies are, why we're following them, and show them that stuff and take any concerns that they have then, and also give them my email and phone number and invite them to call with any questions or write with any concerns, and and guarantee them that their comments will be entered into public record. But ultimately, it's staff's decision. It's not each parking removal is not a council decision.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's a gray area about what is that process and what does it look like and what's fair and what isn't, and to whom, you know?
Yeah, I guess it would be good if there was sort of a reliable formula for determining when you go to that consultation process. I think right now, I mean, we saw it a little bit with Garrett Street. Like, anytime you're dealing with streets in the South Hills area, or there's like a little bit more trepidation that we didn't really discuss as much with streets on, say, the north side or in the center part of Missoula. And there's no real rhyme or reason for when, at least in this flow chart, as to when we want to go to consultation, when we think that that's necessary. And I think the one thing that's good, that I like about the old flow chart is that it's like a reliable equation, a flow chart that you go through, and it's either yes or no. And I mean, you can have one that says, an end point in the flow chart that says, okay, at this point we should go to consult with, the affected residents, potentially affected residents. I don't know.
So maybe, rather than is there on-street parking which can be removed or reconfigured to make room for bike lanes, rather than having a yes and no right there, maybe that's where we do a sub-questions similar to what's in the old chart, and that we have specifics for from up above, where we ask flowchart questions about each of these. What is the estimated vehicle volume? What is the estimated vehicle travel speed? What is the estimated bicycle volume? What is the important, and so then we have that filled out for each section, and that, when there's a certain answers to each of those questions.
I think that's great. And then, we would have it on the record like a data-driven decision, as opposed to just going based off of, the fingers on the pulse of whether or not people are upset about it.
Yeah.
So you'd have sort of a scoring system, a rubric, if you will.
Absolutely.
By doing those other checkpoints, then that lets you say the yes or no. by getting a certain score on your rubric.
Yeah, and that was, I also included at the end of this is the example from Linda Vista where we did that. What type of project was it that necessitated repaving? What's the functional class of the roadway? What's the curb-to-curb width? Volumes, speeds, both posted and observed, adjacent land use, on-street parking, bike lane or route, connections to the system, planned connections. Are the driving lanes able to be reduced? Are they able to be narrowed? Is there boulevard? Where does snow and leaves go? How would reconfiguration affect pedestrians and or transit users? And so then we could have, not only have answers to each of those questions, but have examples or have suggestions for if the answer to this question is within this range, keep going down the list, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, is the observed speed over 35 miles an hour? If the answer is yes, then we can stop going down this list and just say, oh, this is probably, well, actually for a bike lane, that's fine. So yeah, this will just help us determine what type of facility in general we want to put there.
Cool, it was an awesome discussion, you guys, and we're kind of running out of time for today's meeting, so.
Yeah, and this is one that doesn't really have it's good to be discussing it in line with the project list, because it will be neat to see how, I mean, maybe if we apply this rule to how we determined what the recommendations are for this, if maybe between this month and next, if you guys could go through that, and I'll also take another stab at the flow chart and send that out before next month's meeting, and then hopefully we can get a kind of thumbs up from the board on Admin Rule 415 so that we can bring it forward through Public Works Committee and get it adopted as something for staff to follow in the not too distant future. There's no huge hurry on it, but it makes sense now heading into striping season.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate that, and thanks for all your comments, everybody. All right, general comments and announcements. Start with Corey. Nada, Danny? Jeff? All right, Ben? Or Ben? Bob?
In addition to the local Bike Month activities, I just mentioned that there is a national, runs all summer, the National Bike Challenge. If anybody's interested, you can see me about it. Primarily, the issue is just tracking all of your trips. I do that with Strava, and it goes in automatically into the Bike Challenge, so it's tracked for me.
Thanks. Gene?
Yeah, I'm still in the baby stages of trying to work into a, for Missoula or the university people with the bike share going in, hopefully, a online bike safety tutorial. I'm trying to work, I didn't get too far at this point with, no, I lost his name at the university. Is it Jason? Jacob? Anyhow. Jordan, thank you. He was a J guy. And right now I'm trying to work with some of the people at Missoula in Motion. Anyhow, a reason I'm mentioning it is if there's anybody on the board that has good computer skills for trying to put something together like this on a user-friendly basis, that where people can go in and look at video clips and schematics and text and things like that to learn about safe and effective cycling, keeping themselves safe and being responsible. I could like to increase my my web of conspirators, if you will.
Thanks, Gene. Rob? No? All right. I don't have anything either, so thanks, everybody. Our next meetings are going to be next committee of the whole Tuesday, May 29th, 6:30. Jack Reedy. Next regular meeting Tuesday, June 5th at 3 p.m. right back here. So we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.